right, hello. I'm going to go ahead and get us started off. My name is Angela Urban, and I am the Education Coordinator for the National Collegiate Acrobatics and Tumbling Association. And I'm joined by my colleagues, Janelle Cook, who is our Executive Director, and Siobhan White, who is our Associate Director. So three of us will be taking you through this webinar, this course on collegiate acrobatics and tumbling, and we want to be able to answer any questions or anything based on recruiting, officiating, the organization in general. The three of us can tackle all of those questions. So we will take any questions at the end. So feel free to use the chat feature. That's where we'll field all of the questions from, and then we will go back at the end and answer any unanswered questions. So we're going to get started here. Let me move my face out of the way. Okay. So like I said, this is the National Collegiate Acrobatics and Tumbling Association, and we are the governing body for the collegiate acrobatics and tumbling, for the sport of collegiate acrobatics and tumbling. So we're going to discuss the opportunities for your athletes at the collegiate level. Not sure how to scroll to the next. There we go. Okay. It wasn't letting me scroll to the next screen. And I'm going to let Siobhan take it away.
Hey, Ange, you're not sharing your screen.
Oh, it says I'm sharing my screen.
I'm seeing it.
Okay, it might have been me. Sorry, guys. So I was just like, I just see Ange's beautiful face. Good evening, everybody, and thanks for joining us on our call today. We'll be discussing what the NCATA is so that everyone is aware of that as we provide you with an overview of what acrobatics and tumbling is, including our current student athletes, sports backgrounds, and where our member institutions are located. So we're going to talk about how you and your athletes can become student athletes and scholarship opportunities, and how acrobatics and tumbling student athletes are recruited. So a little bit of history, acrobatics and tumbling started 11 years ago. It began to meet the needs of gymnasts and competitive cheerleaders that did not have a competitive home at the collegiate level. You can see a lot of aspects of artistic gymnastics, acrobatic gymnastics, and tumbling involved, as well as some aspects of competitive cheerleading. The National Collegiate Acrobatics and Tumbling Association provides guidance, leadership, and governance for the sport of acrobatics and tumbling at the collegiate level based on fair and safe competition, while adding competitive varsity opportunities that are truly life-changing for female student athletes. The NCATA continues to promote acrobatics and tumbling, creating new competitive opportunities for student athletes, coaches, and institutions with an emphasis on the value of responsibility, competitiveness, dedication, and sportsmanship. So in 2013, we started a partnership with USA Gymnastics to continue, and we continue to work with them to grow the sport at the youth level. So Janelle is going to tell you a little bit about our NCAA emerging sport status.
Hello, everyone, and thanks again for joining to learn more about acrobatics and tumbling. My quick slide here is to talk to you a little bit about if acrobatics and tumbling, the question we get a long time, is this an NCAA sport? So tell you a little bit about the emerging sport process and where we are within that, and then what our ultimate goals will be at the end of the day to become a full NCAA championship sport. So it starts with a recommendation from the Committee on Women's Athletics that works at the NCAA to promote and encourage new opportunities for women to compete. And so we received that recommendation in June of 2019, after about 10 years of creating the sport, refining it, building it, and into what it is today. Then each division gets to decide, Division 1, 2, and 3, if they're going to continue forward with legislation to add the sport as an emerging sport officially in their division. So we were very fortunate to get those recommendations from each division and to be affirmed in January of 2020 for Division 1 and 2, and then later in July because of coronavirus in all 3 divisions. So now as of August 1st, 2020, acrobatics and tumbling is an official NCAA emerging sport in all 3 divisions. The next step will be to make it to 40 competing teams. Right now, we have 34 members, and this year's a little bit wonky because of coronavirus, but we have 34 members that have announced programs and are recruiting student athletes. So when we get to 40 that are competing, we'll be eligible to apply for championship status, which is kind of the full-fledged level of NCAA sport. So when you think of March Madness, or you think of NCAA gymnastics championship, those are the sports that have all reached that championship status. So hopefully, we need to update our slide. I missed that little detail in there. Sorry, it says 30, but we'll be up to 34 here. Since the pandemic started, we added 4 new schools, and you'll hear a little bit more about that later. All right, back to you, Siobhan. Oh, and you're still on mute.
You're muted.
My bad. Okay, so this slide will clarify a little bit more. We have 36 schools that have the sport of acrobatics and tumbling. 34 are NCAA schools, and those are the schools that are going to count toward NCAA status, NCAA championship status. The 2 other schools are NAIA schools, which they have a different governing body, but the sport is competed the same right now. We compete against those schools. NCAA and NAIA schools will compete against each other right now. Typical roster sizes vary depending on the size of the school itself, from 24 to 45 women. Student athlete experience is on par with every other varsity sport. So what that means is your student athlete will be treated just like the football players or the basketball players or the soccer players. They're given access to tutors and scholarship opportunities. The weight room, the weight coaches, full-time coaches will be their actual acrobatics and tumbling coaches. Those coaches don't have other, for the most part, do not have other duties on campus. They are full-time acrobatics and tumbling coaches. They have facilities that are specific to the sport, whether it's sharing a facility with someone or not, but there's not a lot of fighting for practice time. I don't know if you guys are familiar with collegiate cheerleading. There's a lot of fighting for practice space with those programs, or club programs may or may not have that practice space or those perks that true student athletes get. So acrobatics and tumbling athletes are treated like a true student athlete on their campus. So they're equivalent to everybody else that is on campus, just like a gymnast would be treated, or whatever varsity sport that those schools offer, the acrobatics and tumbling team will be treated the same way. So like I said, you've got the physical health support, the mental well-being support, academic success. You've got typically, if there's academic tutors available to each of the other sports on the campuses, they will be provided to the acrobatics and tumbling student athletes, just as the any career development, any sort of non-sport related development is accessed by the acrobatics and tumbling. So they like to have a holistic approach with all student athletes. Acrobatics and tumbling athletes get that same holistic approach from whatever the university offers. This is a little bit more about the meet format and the basics of the meet. So typically there's 2 teams competing. Every now and then we have 3 teams competing. The meets last between 90 and 120 minutes, kind of depending on if there's 2 or 3 teams competing. There are 6 events with a total of 20 heats. So the compulsory event, which is a familiar word in the gymnastics world where everybody's routine is the same. So you're comparing apples to apples. There's 4 heats in each of the compulsory events. I'm sorry, in the compulsory event, there's 4 heats. The events are the acro. It kind of follows this list below, but there's an acro compulsory, pyramid compulsory, toss compulsory, and tumbling compulsory. So those skills will all be performed by each team, and they are the same skills, so that the officials, or the judges, we call them officials in our sport, can compare apples to apples. And then we move into the optional heats and events. So those 5 events are the acro heat. The acro event. There's 3 heats in the acro event. Each heat, as I go through these, each heat is going to have a different set of requirements. So there's different synchronization requirements, different start value, or ways to build your start value. You have to have a different, maybe an inversion and, a vertical is what we call it when you're standing on your feet, or a flipping motion or a twisting motion. There's different requirements in each of the heats as you go through all of the 5 optional events. So you've got the acro, pyramid, toss. Tumbling has 6 heats. There's 3 group heats and 3 individual heats, all of which have different requirements. And then there is the team event, which is 2 minutes and 45, or up to 2 minutes and 45 seconds, set to music, where there are 24 athletes out on the floor at once, kind of combining all of those other optional heats and events into one big routine with up to 24 athletes on the team. And so this is a little quick overview of what I just talked about, but it gives you a little bit more information. Sounds like Minnie Mouse. Does it sound like Minnie Mouse to you guys?
It's not playing on this end, and so maybe we can throw the link in the chat for everybody.
Okay.
And they can watch it and you can keep moving. I'll grab it and throw it in the chat.
Good suggestion, because it sounded like the chipmunks.
Well, we don't want that. And it's still on your slide, your the Meet Basics slide.
It's in the chat now. I see it.
Okay. We will move on to the next slide then. There we go. Okay. So what does an annual training cycle look like for an acrobatics and tumbling athlete? So their athletes typically report to campus about the same time that a typical student would report to campus, which is, it will give or take August if you're on a semester school, September sometimes if you're a quarter school, but you're pretty much going to report about the same time as a normal student would. And then all of the coaches are trained to take it slow, because we are recruiting from so many different sports disciplines that we kind of have to integrate everybody in so that everybody understands the language that this sport uses, the techniques that this sport uses. And then we're integrating cheerleaders with gymnasts, with acrobats, with power tumblers. And so there's just a lot of different disciplines all coming in at once. So the training at the very beginning in the fall is very slow to integrate everybody. A lot of it is focused on sports specific strength and conditioning. So as I was taking over the Region 7 Instagram, I made, there was a post that was very specific to the strength and conditioning. That's something that's the basis for our sport, that your athletes will be in the weight room, which is new to everyone. So no matter what discipline you came from, very few athletes have been in the weight room in the capacity that a collegiate athlete would have been. So it is very new to everybody. And so they are trained most of the time. Each school has their own specific sports and strength and conditioning coach. So they are trained to take these girls through a very basic regimen in the strength and conditioning world and build them up over the course of the year and the 4 years that they'll be there. So that, like I said, is a basis for our sports to just get everybody kind of on the same page with leg strength, power, overhead strength, core stability, and all the strength that it's going to take to lift athletes that are much closer in size to each other than maybe the typical acrobats are used to. These girls are not as varied. They're going to be between most of the time 100 to 140 pounds. Every now and then you get a 90 pounder or a 180 pounder in there, that's able to have a larger gap of weight, but a lot of times these girls are going to be a lot closer in weight. So that's where the strength and conditioning really comes into play for us. So like I said, fall training is skill progressions, everybody kind of getting on the same page from the sport backgrounds. And then practices are limited based on the NCAA. So no more than 20 hours a week per NCAA rules. And that's no more than 4 hours a day. So typically broken up into 4 to 6 days a week of practice. And that also includes the strength and conditioning. So if you could do 2 hours of practice and 2 hours of strength and conditioning, for example, in the same day and make up your 4 hours if that's how you want to do it. So each team's going to do that a little bit differently. And then as we move into competition season, which is February through April, they're continuing to train in the strength and conditioning aspect, but a lot more of that comes into building their skills and their actual events that they'll be competing. The national tournament is typically hosted in the last week of April. So we are training, they have to compete in a minimum. This is all pre-COVID. So COVID has thrown a little wrench into things about how we compete this year, but typically it's 6 meets, that regular season meets that each team has to compete in, 2 at home, 2 away meets, and then 2 are however else, your schedule is filled. And then the top 8 teams, and I think we're going to go over this a little bit later, but the top 8 teams qualify for the national tournament, and we'll talk a little bit more about the national tournament in a few more slides.
All right, so here is a map that will give you a sense of where all of our participating institutions are. And as Ange mentioned earlier, we have 36 members of the NCATA that are competing in varsity acrobatics and tumbling on their campuses. They're from all 3 divisions of the NCAA, as well as 2 schools in the NAIA. So you can see the breakdown at the bottom of the slide. So we've grown regionally in the Northeast and Southeast, and we're continuing to grow across the country and have new teams adding all the time. So we are closely coming up to that 40. So a key element in being considered a varsity program and in the eyes of Title IX is having legitimate championship opportunities. So we've worked really hard to create a championship that mirrors NCAA tournaments. And we've recently been able to grow our conference opportunities. So the NCATA championships are held annually each year, like Angela mentioned, in April. And they're on a member institution campus. So we have actually been hosting, we would have hosted our 10th championship tournament this past April at the University of Oregon, but COVID. It includes an 8-team single elimination tournament, as well as event finals for acro, pyramid, toss, and our tumbling events. And that provides 15 additional opportunities for teams to win at the championship level. So we have full conference sponsorships with the Mountain East Conference, which is a Division II conference primarily in West Virginia. And they hosted their first conference championship in 2019. The Conference Carolinas is also a Division II conference with institutions in Georgia, Tennessee, North and South Carolina. And they were slated to host their first conference and event finals championships this past spring in 2020. Hopefully we'll see that happen this upcoming spring. So we are continuing to grow at the conference level as well as regionally so that we can get to that championship status.
And Siobhan's going to continue, but we're going to talk about the future student athletes and the recruitment process and how all of that works.
Yeah, thank you. So scholarships are really exciting and everyone would love to get a scholarship, but we want to make it clear that no one will get, quote, a full athletic ride. So scholarship opportunities may include athletic or academic or other aid or a combination of those aids. With our Division I and Division II schools, student athletes may receive athletic and or academic aid. Division III is not allowed to offer athletic scholarships, but they do offer academic and other aid. And sometimes we see our Division III institutions put together some really nice packages for their student athletes. Our teams use the equivalency scholarship model. So this is similar to other college sports like softball and soccer. So the best thing to do is contact the institution you're interested in to see what types of scholarships they have available. So looking at the equivalency model, and it's commonly referred to as partial, depending on the division, schools may have up to a certain number of scholarships, and then those scholarships are divided among several athletes. The head count model would be similar to NCAA gymnastics, where there is one scholarship, like one full scholarship per person. So currently our student athletes are coming from 43 states and 4 countries. I know going into the next time that we do our survey that the number of countries will have increased, and 61% of our student athletes attend an institution that is actually outside of their home state. Our student athletes, like Angela mentioned earlier, are composed of a variety of backgrounds. So that is something that we really pride ourselves in. For the current NCATA student athletes high school experience, about 50% were artistic gymnasts throughout high school. We see geo gymnasts anywhere from level 7 to level 10, as well as gymnasts from the Excel track. About 5% come from other gymnastics disciplines like acrobatic gymnastics or tumbling and trampoline, or sorry, trampoline and tumbling, as well as student athletes coming from other sport experiences like track and field or soccer, to just name a couple. The balance comes from competitive cheerleading. So the majority of our student athletes have a cheerleading or gymnastics background, but several also have multiple sport experience. One of the many pieces about our sport is that our institution's rosters include athletes of all different body types, and that is utilized with different skill positions. So we do have crossover rules. So you'll never see a student athlete compete in every single heat. But you may have athletes specialize within events. Okay, Andrew.
Okay, so where do the acro athletes shine? So this is very specific to this group. So bases, as an acro base, obviously the body control and overhead strength is something that our coaches are really excited about with the acro athletes. And then technique and knowledge, it adds technique and knowledge to our sport. And I'll go over that in a second. Your tops, flexibility is a huge piece of what you guys do. Your air awareness, balance, and your knowledge of both hand, foot, and hand-to-hand skills, as well as your dynamic tossing skills. So acro athletes bring the abilities to the table that allow growth for the other girls, the other athletes that are on the team. And what that means is just like any other discipline, so maybe the gymnasts are going to come in with a lot of tumbling knowledge and a lot of power. Well, the acro athletes are going to come in with a lot of just the ability to lift another human in a very efficient manner, and train some of the other maybe non-acro athletes a lot quicker than maybe 2 people that are trying to learn a hand-to-hand skill at the same time would be able to. So if you have an acro base in there, let's just say with a gymnast top, that gymnast top is going to learn her hand-to-hand skill a lot quicker with an acro base than she may with a cheer base or with a gymnastics base, and vice versa with the acro tops, able to kind of train those gymnast bases or those cheerleading bases a little bit quicker than 2 people that have never been in acro before would. So that adds a huge benefit to our recruiting processes as coaches are going to look for acro athletes. The other thing that's interesting about our sport is every year we update the code of points and we're introducing new skills constantly. And a lot of that is coming from the acro world, when athletes can do different skills that maybe some of the other previous recruits couldn't do. So then there was no use in bringing those skills to the table. Well, now those acro athletes are able to do that. Same goes for tumbling. When you get a high level gymnast in there, some skills have been added or combinations have been added because athletes are coming in able to do those combinations where there had not been athletes able to do that prior. So that's where acro athletes have a huge benefit in adding just more skill options to our sport and training options to our sport. So I discussed this a little bit earlier, but differences between youth acro and collegiate acrobatics and tumbling. One would be the team aspect. So you're working with several different teammates throughout the year, rather than just training with one or two all year. There's a lot of cross training going on. You're typically not going to be training with the same base and top combo the entire year. You would be very, very lucky if you got to do that on an acrobatics and tumbling team. So you're going to be switched around a lot. So that's something that's a little bit different. Like I said before, we're integrating athletes from all different sports disciplines that are trying to learn the aspects of the sport entirely. So some are going to excel in different areas than others. And like Siobhan said, there's crossover rules. So you can't compete in every event as it is just based on the rules. But then there's also people that come in and specialize. So if you think of a football team, there's not, a quarterback on the defense. There's only a kicker is the kicker. He's going to do that. The running back is the running back. He's going to do that. So kind of you specialize in certain things. Some people can do all of the things. Some people come in and they're just tumblers. Some people come in and they just compete in acro or they just compete in toss. And that's where having those larger rosters is beneficial. So the game day roster, just to kind of go back to that, the game day roster is 28. That's how many can compete on any given game day. There's 24 athletes in the team event. That's the maximum number of athletes that can be in the team event. So there are 4 specialist athletes that can compete in those other those other 5 events or 19 heats technically. So there's lots of areas for our acro athletes to shine. A lot of times they're featured in acro, pyramid, and toss in both the compulsory heats and in the optional heats. There are several athletes that don't tumble and are featured in the team event. I believe it was the 2018 most valuable player was a girl from Baylor University. She was actually a former cheerleader, but she never flipped over once ever in any meet. And she was the MVP of the entire National Collegiate Acrobatics and Tumbling Association that year. So you do not have to be an all-around athlete to make a huge impact on this sport. And so I think that's something that's really unique about our sport and also encourages lots of different disciplines to come and be recruited for these teams. Like I said, the tumbling requirement, yes, there's a tumbling requirement for the team overall, but not necessarily each athlete has to do that. Just like sometimes our gymnasts come in and they excel in the tumbling piece, but have never lifted another human over their head. And it takes them a couple of years to kind of learn how to do that. So there's definitely opportunities for both groups. Acro athletes kind of pick up the slack for those gymnasts in the acrobatic area, and the gymnasts can pick up the slack for the acro athletes in the tumbling area. And then like I mentioned earlier, those base and top sizes, height and weight, are a lot more similar to each other in our sport at the collegiate level. We have a wide range of weights and sizes and heights in our sport, which I think is very unique. If you watch any of the meets, you'll see those itty bitty people, and then you'll see those girls that are quite sizable. And sometimes those two get paired together, but most of the time it's going to be those mid-range people that you're working with and pairing with. So just knowing that it's a little bit different than how they're sized up in the sport of acro.
So going back to recruiting, I did want to say something about the scholarship opportunities again. So the majority of our schools, if you remember the map, kind of fall into that Division II category. So just a quick example, if you have a Division II team that has a maximum of 9 total athletic scholarships, they can provide, they are usually divided among many athletes on the team, and the amounts of aid can vary. So you can have those 9 scholarships divided among 10, 15, 20, 24 student athletes, and then the aid per athlete can be different. So one student athlete could get $1,000 or one could get $6,000. So it's up to that coach and that coaching staff how that aid is divided among the student athletes. And then, yes, there are opportunities that are available for international student athletes as well. So this is a small snapshot of the recruiting rules based on the different divisions. I'm just going to briefly explain the different methods that our coaches and prospective student athletes engage in during the recruiting process. So you'll notice that the NAIA schools have more flexibility in relation to our NCAA institutions. The recruiting questionnaire can be completed by prospective student athletes at any time. And those questionnaires are on all of our participating institutions' websites. You can also find them on the NCATA page. Usually there's a link there that will take you over to that recruiting questionnaire for that institution. Non-recruiting materials are items that you may receive from the college or university that are generally academic in nature. Recruiting materials tend to come from the institution's athletic department or specific athletic programs at that school. For contact, calls and messages, you can contact that institution to express your interest, but you have to also realize that if it's before you're eligible to have regular correspondence with them, their response will be limited and you might only receive one email stating the contact guidelines. So you can keep them updated with emails about your academics, how you're doing in school, how you're doing in your program, your competitive schedule, how you do it at certain meets. You can send them video clips, but you also have to understand that they may not be able to respond if you don't fall into that contact window. So they definitely like getting those updates, but know that you might not hear anything back. And it's not because they're not interested. It's just because you don't fall within that contact window. Contact off campus in person. This could be a coach coming to your gym to watch a practice or watch a meet, or going to, meeting that coach outside at a Starbucks. All right, Ange. So there are different types of visits when it comes to the recruiting process. With an unofficial visit, the university or college is not paying or they're not sponsoring that visit to their school. So that visit to that school is coming out of your own pocket. An official visit would be financially covered by the school that is recruiting you. So they would take care of you going to that school for a visit. Then there are limits to how many official visits you are permitted. So outside of Division I, you are allotted one official visit per school. All right, so Angela's going to talk to you a little bit more in depth about the steps in the recruiting process.
Okay, so everybody's favorite topic, COVID-19, has thrown a wrench in everybody's schedules and worlds, not to mention the recruiting world at the collegiate level. So coaches are recruiting 2021 seniors still. So if you are a 2021 senior or you have a 2021 senior, there is still plenty of opportunity to assign to one of these programs. So if you've been following our social media, the NCATA social media, you will have seen lots and lots of signees come through. But in the grand scheme of things, there is plenty of room on teams to continue assigning these 2021 seniors. So know that. The dead period is something that the NCAA deems as a period of time where there can be no visits to campus, all that kind of stuff. We are still in a dead period. So the unfortunate thing, and I believe that is through the end of April of 2021 as of right now. It has been continually pushed back since COVID began. I imagine it may continue in that pattern. So what that means for our 2021 seniors and our 2022 juniors is that they may be offered a position on one of these teams and never have the chance to visit one of the universities, unfortunately. And that is something that all of the class of 2020 pretty much dealt with once 2020 actually hit. Anybody that signed in 2020 did not get to visit that school prior to committing.
Can I add something real quick, Anne?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. Just want to encourage folks too to be really checking in with those institutions, because some of these regulations may be lifted, and typically Division I is more stringent and Division 2, 3 have a little more flexibility. So there may be soon, or depending on campus regulations and things like that, believe Division 2 has some more flexibility for those visits. But absolutely, a lot of virtual tours taking place and a lot of commitments without visits going on for sure.
Yes, thank you, Janelle. I was not aware of that. So yes, virtual campus tours. There's oftentimes on the campus, or I'm sorry, on the institution's website, you can find virtual campus tours, but the coaches have become very, very good at FaceTime tours and calls. So there is a way to be able to see all of the facilities and virtually meet people. I think everybody's familiar with Zoom and how all of that works. And so the coaches have definitely taken advantage of that when, showing recruits around and introducing them to the people that they're going to be dealing with when they get on campus. SAT and ACTs, that's something to contact the institutions about as well. I know the class of 2020, a lot of institutions waived those tests because some of them were not able to take them because the testing spots were shut down. So if that is continuing, which I believe that it is, based on the contact that I've had with some of my athletes at the youth level, SATs and ACT testings are hard to come by. So the institutions are waiving those. So don't get too caught up in the fact that you may or may not be able to take those tests. That's something that the institutions will walk you through their process and how they're handling that. Be sure to stay in touch with your high school guidance counselors. So that's pretty much at any stage of the recruiting process. Once you hit high school, you want to get in touch with that high school guidance counselor that has the background in NCAA knowledge. Most of them will. And they are going to want to make sure that you are in all of your classes according to NCAA rules. If you're in a traditional high school program, you are typically set up to be in a traditional NCAA track. If you're being homeschooled or doing a virtual online school that's not associated with a traditional high school, sometimes those tracks get a little just off track with what NCAA requires. So there's a certain amount of core classes that you have to complete each year of your high school career. So for instance, you couldn't cram in all of the academic courses in your senior year so that you can go play a sport. You would have to take them over the course of your 4 years. So just something to think about, nothing to freak out about if you're not in touch with a high school guidance counselor. That is okay. You are likely okay, but it is good to go ahead and touch base with those people, touch base with the college coaches early on, because they can help you through that process too. They have contact with their compliance offices that can help review transcripts. Whether you're a sophomore, junior, senior, whatever, they can review your transcript and make sure, okay, Sally needs to add this course to her junior schedule, or add this course to her second half of her senior year or whatnot. So just be sure to be in touch with high school counselors and those coaches early on so they can help you through that process. And then continue to follow the NCATA social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, we're on all of those. And then, because we will put recruiting advice on there, school updates on there, lots of videos once the season starts here in a couple weeks. And then we have a YouTube page as well that has skill shorts that we've filmed. So the basics of our sports, just different ways that we perform things, maybe different verbiage that we use to kind of accommodate all of the disciplines that we are incorporating into our sport. So those are good things to watch, especially if you've got itty bitties that are, starting out in this sport and they're kind of, wanting to do this, or your high school age athletes that just to see kind of some of the skills that we do and some of our compulsory skills that we do. So that YouTube page is under NCATA on YouTube. You can subscribe to that channel. So how to walk through the recruiting process. So visiting the ncata.org, that's our website, you can go on and click the members tab at the top, and you can see all 36 members of the NCATA. And it has all of the coaches' contact information, as well as where the university is located and all of that sort of essential information about each university. I highly suggest looking through this and, picking your top schools. I would pick, top 10 schools, where do I want to go? Am I cool going across the country? No. Okay, then you can cross out those schools that are across the country from you, kind of thing, and start kind of narrowing down where you want to go and which coaches you want to get in contact with. So starting your freshman year, go ahead and do this and kind of start reaching out to some of those colleges and getting that information just in the back of your mind. So this is a picture of what that website looks like and what that members tab looks like. And then moving from there, you'll want to register with the NCAA Clearinghouse or Eligibility Center, same thing, or the NAIA Eligibility Center. So under the NCAA Eligibility Center, you will register under acrobatics and tumbling. If you are looking at an NAIA school, you will register under cheer or dance. If you are looking at both, you would need to register under both. Like we said, take the SAT or ACT, but that's sort of up in the air right now with COVID-19. And then that core course is required. That's what I was talking about with the guidance counselors and getting in touch with the coach of the collegiate institution so that they can, have your transcript reviewed. So those eligibility centers, you can just Google NCAA Eligibility Center, NCAA Clearinghouse, and create yourself a profile and go through it. It will spit out a NCAA ID number or an NAIA ID number at the end. Be sure that you save that ID number because that's what your coaches will be asking you for as they go to, gather all of your information. And then as you are researching the institutions that you are possibly interested in, go to their athletic websites and fill out their recruiting questionnaire. So I believe almost all of our institutions have a recruiting questionnaire on their websites. Even if you are unsure if you want to go to that institution or it's like 15th on your list, fill out the questionnaire. It doesn't marry you to that university. It just gets your information out there. Fill out as much of the recruiting questionnaires as you can. When I was coaching, a lot of athletes would hesitate to submit their questionnaire because they perhaps didn't have their best ACT score and they didn't want to list one on there, or they weren't sure, they weren't sure about some blank to fill in. So they would wait until they had all of the information, every single question answered, which is appreciated, but at the same time, this is simply to get your name into the pot. So fill out as much information that you can, and then the coaches will contact you and gather the rest of the information that they need. So if you're afraid to put down maybe like, oh shoot, I only have a standing back handspring and they're asking me if I have a standing back tuck, I don't want to fill this out until I have my standing back tuck, don't worry about it. Don't delay filling out a recruiting questionnaire because you may or may not have an answer to a question. Go ahead and get your name in the pot and those coaches will start contacting you. Let's see. Again, make sure not only the location works for you with that institution, but academic programs. If you're an athlete, or if you are an athlete that knows what you want to do going into a career, make sure that that university has your academic program that you want to go to. Make sure that their enrollment size is something that you're interested in. So, do you want to go to a big university? Do you want to go to a smaller university? All of that. And maybe you don't know any of the answers to that question. So that gives you an even broader base to just go ahead and fill out a bunch of questionnaires and get your name out there. So this one was an example of what Converse College's acrobatics and tumbling recruiting questionnaire looked like. This one is what Adrian College's questionnaire looks like. After you fill out the questionnaire, don't hesitate to reach out to that coach directly. So say, hey, coach, so Adrian's coach is Coach Barker. Hey, Coach Barker, my name is Sally. I just want to let you know that I filled out the recruiting questionnaire. Here's a little bit about me. I'm an acrobatics athlete. I'm 17 years old. I graduate in 2021, whatever it may be. Give a short little bio on yourself and just maybe attach a video or don't, doesn't matter. but just shoot that coach an email and give them a heads up. They typically will get an email, just one of those produced emails that said, hey, somebody filled out your questionnaire, but you always want to be on top of it as a recruit, and go ahead and email that athlete. Email that coach. I strongly encourage athletes to take charge of their recruiting process. Parents, yes, you guys are the ones footing the bill most likely, or have been footing the bill in their youth programs, but the collegiate coaches are going to want to talk to the athlete that is going to be on their team. So they're going to want to hear from them, and they're going to want to see that that athlete filled out the questionnaire and that that athlete has their own personal email address and is emailing the coach directly, because they're going to want to know what kind of person is coming onto their team, not necessarily what kind of parent, because that parent's not going to be on the team, that athlete is going to be on the team. So that's a very important part of the recruiting process, is for that, that athlete to take charge of the recruiting process. And again, each division has its own specific rules as to when college coaches can contact student athletes. So just remember that, if you don't hear from them or you get a very brief email, it does not mean that they are not interested. It just means that they may be following a certain set of rules. As you're sharing your recruiting profile, like I said, write a short biography. Here's a list of things that you can, add in that little biography. Your academics, your activities, if you have any other extracurriculars like drama, or if you're in another sport, any honors, your competition background, and then your team information. So if you're on a high school team, provide that coach's contact information, phone number, and email, and same with your club coach too. So making recruiting videos. You can make a recruiting video. You can do them on your phone, something super easy. It doesn't have to be this big combination of videos set to music with graphics and all these crazy things. You can literally film it on your phone or your tablet and just email it straight to the coach and say, hey coach, here's my standing back tucker, here's my hand-to-hand, whatever it may be. And they can just be in clips, and that is perfectly fine. You can also create an Instagram profile that is specific to your athletic abilities. So maybe you've got your own personal Instagram file where you're posting your selfies and whatnot, but create another one that has your skills on it. You can do an Instagram profile, like I said, or a YouTube page that has that same information. Every time you add a video to that profile, if that's the way you decide to do it, send the link to the coach, because they have lots and lots of people that they're going to be talking to. They may not be tracking your specific profile on a daily basis. So you want to make sure that you're updating the coach every time that you place a new video onto one of those profiles. So videos can include dynamic and balance skills from a pair, trio, or your mixed pair. They can be, I would prefer that they're, current videos, not something from when you were, in 7th or 8th grade, something, within the past year or two of things that you've been doing. Any running, tumbling passes, standing, tumbling passes, balance skills. So if you're not necessarily doing something with a partner, maybe you've got acro blocks, you can do your handstands, your presses, your pike holds, straddle holds, all that good stuff. And then the any other skills or abilities that you like to highlight, you can do practices, competitions, anything like that. Don't be afraid to just start sending videos. It doesn't have to be like your best ever thing, because the coaches are going to look at it and be like, okay, cool, that's awesome. I've got Sally. I'm going to file this video under Sally. And then they're going to ask you for different skills too. So they'll have a specific list they'll want to see from you. You can do your tumbling or your tricks on any surface. So it can be a spring floor, non-spring floor, tumble track, air floor. If you're working on a new skill and somebody's throwing you into a pit, that's totally fine. The coaches don't necessarily have to see the finished product. They love to see you actually training some of the new skills too. This is just an example of somebody's YouTube page. So you can see she's got her name up there. She's got a couple of videos on there and that the coaches can click through. What's nice about this one is you can see each video is labeled so that the coach, so a lot of the times the assistant coach is going to be the one that is fielding some of these videos. And so when they go to the head coach and say, hey, look, I've got Allie Alleman here, and the head coach may be like, okay, well, does she have a round off Arabian? And I can be like, oh yes, look, here's her round off Arabian video as the assistant coach. So it's very nice to have everything labeled and clean for the coaches to kind of shift through. Let's see. Other ways that you can kind of integrate yourself into this sport as you're deciding whether this is something for you. Obviously, like I said, follow us on social media. Attend camps. Oddly enough, some of the institutions are continuing to host camps. So certain states have different regulations and they're able to do that. So attend the camps if you can. And that's a great way to get sport and skill exposure as well as see the campus. And you'll actually get to learn with the actual coach that you may be working with and some of the current student athletes. A lot of times the current student athletes are the helpers at the camps. So sometimes there's overnight camps, there's day camps, there's all sorts of camps that you guys can attend. So keep a lookout. We'll make that, we try to promote that stuff on the NCATA, but if you follow our Instagram page, all of the other Instagram pages for the 36 institutions are linked in our highlights. So if you go to our highlights, you can go through and click each of the profiles for each of the 36 universities. And that's where I would suggest, highly suggest following the individual institutions as well. So you can get up-to-date information. Attend a meet if you can, if your state allows it, if the institution is allowing it, and it's something that you can, do without spending a ton of money, go to a meet if there's a member institution near you. But most of the institutions live stream their meets. So for COVID days, definitely we will, the individual institutions will post their live stream links. So again, make sure you're following those individual institutions. They're also online. We will retweet the links. They'll be on our website too, the links to each of the meets as well. And that is the last one. So if there are any questions.
Hey, Ange, I was just going to add while we get questions primed for us, that the NCATA schedule will be posted on the website soon, as Angela is referring. Some schools are still firming up competition and the viability of competition with COVID-19. So if you go to some schools, institutions right now, you may see some meets posted, but a comprehensive schedule will be on the NCATA website here in the next couple of weeks. And then like Angela said, it'll be complete with links to be able to watch those live streams. And most institutions this year, as you may imagine, are not having spectators if they're competing. So the live option is a great one this year. But we have gotten a few emails, asking when the schedule will be out. So I wanted to let you all know that.
Thank you guys so much. Before we start questions from the audience, I just wanted to add two things from my experience. For those of you who don't know, my daughter is a freshman at Frostburg, and this whole process was a little intimidating to me as a parent. We do homeschool our children. They actually attend a virtual school. So if you are in that situation where your child is attending a virtual school, I would strongly suggest that every year that you re-enroll, you check with that school and make sure that they have continued their NCAA eligibility, because they can drop it without even telling you. And that would make your child then lose that ability to earn those credits, or however NCAA determines it. But we were actually looking at a school and they had lost their status, and that's what kept us from going to that school. So it's easier for a virtual school to lose that status rather than the brick and mortar, so you're pretty safe if you go to a standard school, but those virtual schools and homeschooling, that can be an issue. The other thing I will say is there are colleges out there that do not require SATs or ACTs any longer. If you're looking for a scholarship though, your child needs to take the ACT or SAT. So it's not something just to get into the college that you can forego. At some point in time, they're gonna have to take it, or they're not gonna be considered for a scholarship. And you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but that was the experience that I found, is that we were looking at a couple colleges that just didn't require SATs. So we almost got into this situation where we didn't take one. So that's just something to think about when COVID is not an issue, of course. Okay, so we do have one question. Hi, Lisa, I see your note. Are other schools considering adding acro as a sport?
Hi, Lisa. Thank you for your question. Yes, we have a lot of schools interested in adding acrobatics and tumbling on their campus. Unfortunately, as you may imagine with COVID, things have slowed down a little bit in expansion. We have 4 new programs as of March that have added, and interest from all divisions and NAIA schools to continue adding. So we're hoping to have some new announcements soon, but it's they're in the works. So like Angela said, stay tuned to the website and our social media for those announcements. But we do have a pretty good group that are in the planning stages and a large group that are in the exploration phase. So we'll keep you posted.
Is there a big difference between the NCAA schools and the NAIA schools?
Most of the differences are that governing body. So operationally, no, in terms of there's no difference in the competition or, you know, in what Angela mentioned in terms of each program is a varsity program on those campuses. So it's really more of the internal operations of the school. As we grow, those, you know, will be separated out into different entities. But at this point, we're competing in the same group and all of the programs are varsity programs on their campuses.
Let's see. Okay, is there a relationship between NCATA and the USAG gymnastics?
Yeah, that's a great question. There is a strong relationship. We partnered with the USA Gymnastics in 2013 to have youth acrobatics and tumbling added as a discipline under Gymnastics for All. And since then, we've been working closely with them to try to grow the program. As you know, the sport of collegiate acrobatics tumbling has evolved very quickly. And so we've been very nimble. We are doing rule changes each year, growing it and changing it differently. As you're probably very well familiar, the cycle is a little longer within the youth program. So that's evolved a little bit slower, but I'm sure you're all well aware there's a new director for acrobatic gymnastics, Shelby Salmon, and we've worked with her over the past few years while she was in education. So we're really excited to work with her here. And I know that they're planning to convene and do a comprehensive review, and we'll be part of that that review and seeing how we can get the youth program to mirror the collegiate program a little more closely.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Sorry, I am not the most technology advanced person out there, so I'm just trying to look for wherever the boxes are that are flashing at me.
Absolutely, no problem.
Does anybody else have any questions? This is the perfect time to ask them. Are any of you in the process right now and would like to share your experience?
Well, we know we give a lot of info, so there's probably a lot of questions. Maybe they can't.
There probably are. You're right. I do see a couple coaches online. Just in general, is there something that our acro coaches could do that might help our kids, or at least point us in the right direction? Or is this something that just the athlete themselves should be doing?
Go ahead, Ange.
That's actually a great question. The coaches can help a lot. They are actually able to override, for lack of a better term, those NCAA contact rules. So your coaches can talk to the college coaches at any point. So even if your athlete is in 5th grade and is interested in going to a university at some point, those coaches can override that contact date. So yes, that is a huge way that they can get involved. The other way is to be open to having the NCATA coaches into the gym so that they can meet the athletes, watch practices, create relationships with parents and the coaches themselves. Even if nothing comes to fruition that year immediately following the contact, but just to build a relationship over the course of time. That's a huge way that the acro coaches can help. I know that's sometimes tough as a recruiter, a college recruiter, to get a coach on the phone at gyms. I actually work at a recreational gym, and the coaches never answer the phone. Obviously, the front desk people are answering. And then the coaches aren't there all day. They're there, after hours. So they're not fielding phone calls. So have those front desk people take notes and pass those things to the coaches, and be willing to have the conversation with the acrobatics coaches, even if it's to say, no, I'm not interested, please don't come here, just so that that coach can mark that gym off of their list, type of thing. But for the most part, like, that is a key way that those athletes can get around those NCAA rules, is by using those acro coaches.
Perfect. Yes, this is very new to even, I think, the acro coaches, because we've had maybe 5 or 6 schools, and then all of a sudden there was like 23 schools, and now every year more schools are being added. So I think even for the coaches, this is a new thing. So anything that we can do to kind of help, I guess, integrate it into what is our norm would be great. So thank you guys for offering this. Anybody else have any questions?
And from a parental side, if you guys are going into your gyms and talking to your coaches, just mentioning that too, just say, hey, this sport is there. I would, if my daughter doesn't want to do it, but it's out there for these girls to, for gym retention, if nothing else, keep the athletes in acrobatics. Don't, they don't have to go to cheerleading. They don't have to go to traditional gymnastics or do something else. Keep them in the gyms, even if they don't have a partner that year, or they're not able to, get into make a certain level or competition, or they're getting discouraged with the sport in general. Start training them individually for the collegiate programs. That may be a way that parents can kind of encourage those coaches to make contact and be more embracive of acrobatics and tumbling.
Do you guys, and you may not have this answer, this is just a personal question for me. Do you guys know is there a timeline for when the scholarship will hit, like, the college, and then the college will, I guess, give it to the student? Do you guys have anything to do with that? Or is it just once the scholarships are awarded, it's up to the school to individually, I guess, give the money to the kids or to their account?
I'll take this one. Yeah, it differs on each campus. So the NCATA is not involved in that. And so Siobhan mentioned briefly before, we are equivalency sport. And so scholarship levels vary on each campus. And then they're divvied out. So say 6 is the limit at Division II, a program may only be funded to have 4. And then those 4 are divvied out different ways amongst young women of all, could be junior, senior, freshmen. So those really vary year to year. And then also the financial calendars at each school vary a little bit. So a lot of times you would have information about opportunities for financial aid in that by that November signing period for Division 1 and 2. And in Division 3, a lot of the financial information comes a little bit later, maybe December or January. And so there's a little bit of a flux there, but kind of that fall through early winter time is when a lot of the information is available about scholarships for institutions to share with prospective student athletes.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
It does a little bit, yes. And do they have to reapply for the scholarship, or once they get it, it's a 4-year deal kind of thing?
Great question. So, and you're talking about athletic scholarship?
Yes.
Yes. So any athletic financial aid is, it differs by division, which is again, something to check out. So I know it's a lot of information. And even within divisions, it can vary. So some, for example, like at the University of Oregon and Baylor, they're in a football bowl division. So they're in an FBS group. They are signing 4-year agreements. Other schools may be signing just typical is an annual 1-year renewable agreement.
Okay. So to renew it, do the kids have to do anything, or is it automatic as long as they're on the team?
Great question. Yeah, that's at the discretion of a coach. But
Okay.
typically, each year, unless there are significant changes, the coach is honoring, what was the previous amount, and may have to introduce, may be able to introduce an increase or maybe a slight decrease. But typically, those are kind of the flow throughout the year. So the athlete just would have a meeting, following the season and before the new academic year, and just reestablish that, and you would know all that information going into the new year.
Perfect. Perfect. Minus COVID, because COVID has messed everything.
Right. Yeah, it's all a little bit crazy with COVID.
Perfect. Okay. Anyone else with any questions? Julie, do you want to say anything about how people might be able to send us some questions if something comes up later? Because I'm sure they're taking in a whole lot of information, and
Oh yeah.
digest everything, the questions will start popping into their head.
I think so. And I think that one thing that I've heard from multiple people who we have spoken to since this discussion started was just about communication and connecting the gaps. So I think that anyone who has any questions can email info.r7au@gmail.com, and I will be more than happy to take those questions back to Angela and Janelle and Siobhan as needed, and let them get in touch with whoever can best answer them for the person who asks. Also, I did put in the chat, we'll go ahead and put a recording of this webinar. If you want to take some time to more thoroughly read through the slides and things on the resource page for R7AU, and we'll add the links that were in the chat. So if you missed any of those and you want to go back to watch them, we can do that. And I'll also post about the questions and things on social media so you have that information. But I can't thank you all enough for entertaining the idea of coming and talking to us. I think this was a huge first step for our sport as far as our acro community, and starting to build the communication and understanding more about the NCATA program. I personally had a lot of misconceptions and assumptions that were wrong that, ultimately through the discussions we've had and through this webinar, I've learned a lot. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time to do this tonight.
Thank you so much for saying that. Yeah, thank you, Julie and Autumn, for hosting. And, we are definitely want to educate, because we know there is, it's new to a lot of folks, and it does differ from acrobatic gymnastics. So we love to do this kind of engagement and education so that we can get more young women involved at the collegiate level. So I would just say, if you have questions too, certainly that's a great channel through Julie to get with us. But also the little Freudian slip there, NCATA website has a lot of this information on there. There's a This is Acrobatics and Tumbling tab that's going to kind of focus on the sport information that Angela detailed. We have a Become a Student Athlete tab that has a lot of that recruiting information and some links to the NCAA websites that Angela referenced. So a lot of good info there. We put together some frequently asked questions from engagement like this where we've gotten questions before. So there may be something there. We have a parent questionnaire, a student athlete. So hopefully just a lot of stuff that you can peruse, and then we're happy to take questions as well. So I'll kick it back to Ange as the leader of the day, but thank you everybody for participating.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Julie, just let me know, field questions to Siobhan and Janelle, like as things come in, because I know this was overwhelming amount of information for some of the people that haven't been talking to us. So it'll settle in, and then I think questions will start.
Yes, and I think it's also going to trickle down. So we've got, like Autumn said, I see several coaches on here and so forth, and I think the information will start to trickle down amongst the parents and within our community, and probably I think we'll see more and more people getting involved and having questions. So appreciate it so much. Thank you guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, bye everybody. Good night. Thank you for joining.
Have a good
Bye.
night, everyone.